Hello, welcome. The long anticipated Trump tariffs have finally been announced, and unsurprisingly, the reaction from stock markets have been quite negative. Now, if you take stock markets as the thermometers of the health of the economy, that doesn't give a very good signal for what's happening to the global economy. In the US alone, in the 2 days after the announcement of tariffs, something like $5.4 trillion of value was lost from the value of US stocks. But tariffs are one major tool in the toolbox used for trade wars. Other things like quotas, export controls, or some form of currency manipulation has been used as a measure for trade wars by different countries. Now, there is broad consensus amongst economists that trade wars are generally bad for consumers. And this was the idea behind the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and the advocacy for free trade amongst different countries. And they say that usually the sum of the losses as part of trade wars is bigger than the sum of wins, but usually the winners have more unity and they have more lobbying power, whereas consumers are typically, they suffer the consequences of tariffs or other measures of trade wars without much lobbying power. But if tariffs are bad, then why have countries imposed them in the past, or they do right now? Well, there is geopolitical power struggles, there is supporting some fundamental local manufacturing or production. So whilst what has happened now with Trump administration is quite unprecedented, during Biden administration, US was imposing tariffs on electric vehicle imports from China. But I think such universal and global tariff imposition is quite rare in the history of world trade. And just for those who might be a bit unfamiliar with the concept of tariffs, it's basically a form of tax on imports. So if you take the t-shirt I'm wearing right now, it's a North Face, which is I think San Francisco, US established brand. But this t-shirt, I checked before recording the video, it actually says made in Turkey. Now, this gets made in Turkey and then it gets shipped to Europe or elsewhere. And now, if before tariffs in the US this was costing, let's say, something like $30, after the, let's say, 10% tariff imposition on Turkey, it's going to cost $33. So when this gets to US borders, $3 needs to be paid to US government. The end picture is that this will cost more for the US consumer. Now, what does the US government think they're doing? They want to encourage the manufacturer of this t-shirt to bring production lines inside the US, which will help employment and the economy of US. What they may not recognize is that, for example, labor costs in US might cost more than Turkey, which might then lead to the t-shirt actually costing, let's say, $35 for the US consumer. And apart from tariffs, there was a lot of talk about currency manipulation during first Trump administration, especially with China. China was accused of weakening its currency to encourage its exports. But this time around, it's been very much all about tariffs. And I think the reason why US this time has not gone about talking about currency manipulation or potentially making US dollar weaker, even though it has got weaker as a result of what has happened last week. But I think there are two main reasons maybe that the currency manipulation has not been into effect this time. One is that US doesn't want to weaken US dollar so that it can maintain its reputation as a reserve currency. And two, I think the US wants to use, if they were going to weaken US dollar, it basically applies, it's like a US index, it will apply to many currencies in the same way, whereas by looking at tariffs, they can almost have this targeted treatment towards different countries. As you saw on that table that Trump was showing, each country gets a certain sort of percentage or number. And finally, to finish up, I think where there are, as they say, where there are losers, they tend to be winners as well. So who are the winners in this chaotic, uncertain new world? Well, I think volatility traders, the risk factors are only going to go up. The risk of doing business, doing any form of trade, import, export between countries, especially as other countries like China are now retaliating with their own tariffs. So it will be a back and forth between different countries. Also, I think winners could be some local manufacturers who do not rely on international supply chains. How likely is that? I mean, how many of those types of manufacturers you can find? Probably not very many. Most of the valuable products that you see now, from the phone that you use to computers, cars, etc., they tend to have parts that are coming from different parts of the world. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this lays out and where the world economy goes in the next few months and years.